Hello, my name is Marcel Mike, and this is my substance abuse in the elderly populations presentation. Um, just to start out, I found that this research was really interesting in regards to the older community and what it is that they do as far as getting help for this type of situation. We often don't think about substance abuse in the same breath as we do younger people, younger generations, but it's also very prevalent in the elderly community, but in different lights. And I hope to be able to share that with you as I go through my presentation. Did you know many of the over 65 population, they misuse substances? Alcohol, prescription drugs is one of the biggest ones that I saw during my research, um, and non-prescription medications. So as it goes on, as they go on, as they get later into life, and as they become more and more dependent upon medications, um, this seems to be the niche that they fall under, which is specifically prescription medications and non-prescription medications. Even though I did see in a couple of research articles that alcohol was prevalent as well. Like I was saying, it's very prevalent in the elderly community, and they try different ways to combat it, specifically using some solution focused therapy and some CBT, trying to empower the client to understand that they need to make changes as far as their drug usage and alcohol, or actually prescription drugs um, uh, misuse. Individuals over the age of 65 make up roughly 12.5% of the U.S. of the total U.S. population, about 35 million people, and they represent the fastest growing cohort by 2030. It's going to double in size, so that should just give you an indicator as to who is going to be affected and how many people are going to be affected. Right now, we're kind of seeing it in the baby boomer generation, as far as those in the nursing home setting, institutional settings. When looking at a recent survey, uh, some of the data showed that it was like, about four and a half, 4.7. I even saw a little bit of data that said 5% had used an illicit drug in the past year. I just keep going back to thinking how, like, maybe it's just mental conditioning of how we view elderly people. When I did this research, I actually thought about my own grandparents, who are no longer here, but I still thought about them. And I'm like, man, I don't ever remember my grandparents, using illicit drugs or illegal drugs or smoking marijuana. But as I dug deeper into the research, I saw that many of the reasons why was because of pain management. Pain being one of the number one reported reasons why elderly use illegal drugs or misuse prescription drugs, is because of the pain tolerance. Um, One of the other things that I saw throughout this, and as far as this workshop goes, is when as clinicians, we look at certain segments of things, right? So we look at maybe the trauma of someone's past and how it affects them now, right? So when doing this research with substance abuse in the elderly population, one of the things that I saw on the screen, and you could read it, is that alcohol consumption uh, was linked to cognitive disorders, cardiovascular illness. So, in that sense, we associate elderly things such as high blood pressure, um, loss of memory, as well as physical disorders. Maybe they're starting to get a little bit slower, achy knees, those type of illnesses that are effective or more common, shall I say, more common in the elderly population than in, let's say, my demographic of, mid 30s or mid 20s. So that I found that to be interesting. That's something that as clinicians we need to look at as far as understanding that substance abuse will affect them in their health. So when we're going to treat that person, we have to treat it dually. So we have to treat the substance abuse, and then we have to come back and treat the health aspect and how their health is deteriorated from all this usage of substance abuse. This is just a little graph that we can all look at right now and see that 3 out of 10 between the ages of 57 to 85 are at least on 5 prescriptions. And that's just prescriptions. That's not using any illegal drugs. That's flat out prescriptions. So if you look at that, there's a high risk in the older populations misusing those drugs. This is just another demographic that I had found that involved, when we're treating our population, getting them the supports that they need is integral. I found that there was a couple research articles that showed that, one of the reasons why in the United States the elderly population is in nursing homes is because they're overwhelmed. Families are overwhelmed for doing tasks or, having to take care of the mental health aspects of, a parent that might be deteriorating or, getting older and possibly on the brink of, expiring. So one of the things that I had found was that, 3/4, which is a huge amount, it's almost 75%. That's one of the primary reasons. So when they're in nursing homes, they're not always cared for in the best setting as they possibly might be, maybe in their own family setting. That was one of the things that I had looked at. So during this workshop, I kind of wanted to also reinforce the fact that, like, hey, it could potentially be that, they're isolated, they're by themselves, they don't have anybody else. So getting that support as a clinician, working with this, with the client that's older, like, hey, do you have aunts, uncles, or, sons, daughters in their aspects? Yeah, sons or daughters that are willing to care for you. Grandkids is another great example as well of people that we can involve in the teaming process to help with the recovery aspects of older people using. So that's one of the reasons how we help this population. As you can see here on this slide, a couple of the points that I want to give is the ability to actively listen and elicit further information if we need to. Sometimes that could be the biggest barrier to helping this population, just to listen to them, find out what's going on with them, find out what is needed. Also providing that constructive feedback was something else that they need. The ability to break down their own goals, be alcohol free, only take the medications at a certain time point, have realistic conversations with their doctors or their nursing, if they're in a nursing home, about their pain and what their pain tolerance could be. Maybe possibly we could create a chart as clinicians and, have it, 1 to 5, my pain is at a 5, my pain is at a 1 today, or, a plus minus system, a thumbs up, a thumbs down. if they're inaudible, or if they're hard to, or if it's getting hard for them to talk. Um, and then we also, last but not least, I just posted it. We want to help aid them in reviewing their product, in their progress, excuse me, and adapting to their plan if need be. Plans change all the time. And this is just my reference page. I appreciate you guys for attending this workshop. It was really, really fun to go back and look at ways that we can help this population.